I'm 34, and I think one of the most humiliating forms of heartbreak is when someone wants your loyalty, your time, your emotional labor, and your exclusivity, but still talks about the relationship like it's some unfinished draft they're not ready to sign off on. That kind of confusion will ruin you faster than a clean rejection. At least a rejection gives you something solid to grieve. A no is painful, but a no has edges. You can bleed around the edges and eventually scar over. What destroys you is someone acting like you are already theirs in practice, while still keeping one foot outside the door, just in case something better wanders by. That was the part I kept trying to rationalize. The part I couldn't rationalize anymore was how quickly I started feeling like I was competing not only with her uncertainty, but with an entire glowing digital world she seemed more devoted to than anything real in front of her. Her name is Sienna. She was 29 when this started. I'm 34. We never officially became boyfriend and girlfriend. That sentence still annoys me to say, because if anyone looked at the way we lived for those months, they would have assumed the title had already been settled. We saw each other constantly, texted all day, spent nights together, did the little domestic things couples do without thinking too hard about them. Grocery runs, coffee orders, watching half a show before falling asleep, sending each other photos of random things in the day because for some reason you know the other person would care. At some point, not even dramatically, we also agreed we wouldn't talk to or see other people. That was the structure. That was the deal. Exclusive behavior, relationship access, relationship expectations, without relationship language. And because everything else felt good at first, I let myself believe the label would come naturally. That after enough consistency, enough closeness, enough time, she would stop calling it seeing where things go and start calling it what it already was. I was wrong. Sienna was the kind of person who made a room look brighter when she first walked into it. Funny, expressive, restless in a way that seemed spontaneous at first instead of destabilizing. She worked occasional freelance jobs, some styling, some social media work, some event help, a patchwork life that always sounded one good month away from becoming a real career if only the universe would cooperate. I liked her energy. I liked how alive she seemed. I liked that she was softer with me than with most people. What I didn't understand at the start was that she had a bottomless appetite for attention, not just affection. Attention. There's a difference. Affection can be intimate. Attention can be industrial. And if someone is built to chase the second one, no amount of real closeness will ever fully compete. At first, it was just her phone. Nothing unusual for modern dating. Everyone is on their phone too much. I'm not 80. I understand that. But with Sienna, it wasn't casual. It was atmospheric. Dinner got paused for notifications. Conversations got interrupted by lives, clips, comments, messages from people I had never heard of and would never meet. If we went out, she was filming. If we stayed in, she was editing. If we went somewhere nice, it became content. If we had a quiet moment, she somehow found a way to angle it toward a screen. Once I planned what I thought was a real date, a place I knew she'd love, rooftop bar, city view, good food, and halfway through the evening I realized I was basically on a production set for her online persona. She was taking pictures of the drinks, the skyline, her face in 3 different lighting angles, my hand on the table, then asking me to retake things because the framing was wrong. At one point, I genuinely wondered whether I was there as a man or as a tripod. The insulting part wasn't the phone itself. It was what the phone represented. I was in front of her, and still somehow I was not the most interesting place her attention could land. Still, I stayed, because in between all that, she could be deeply affectionate. She'd say she missed me, call me first thing in the morning, tell me she felt safest with me, talk about trips we should take, mention neighborhoods we'd both like to live in one day, say little things like, "You're my person," in that dangerous soft way that makes common sense pack its bags and leave the building. So when the uncertainty started bothering me more, I kept telling myself it was temporary. She just moved slower than I did. She had her reasons. She needed time. Time is fine if the direction is clear. But month 7 arrived, and the direction still sounded exactly like month 2. I finally asked her where this was going, not as an ultimatum, not angrily, just honestly. I told her I wasn't trying to pressure her, but after that much time, with that much consistency and exclusivity, I needed to understand what we were doing, whether this was becoming a relationship or whether I was just playing one without the job title. She said she wanted to keep seeing where things go. I remember staring at her because the sentence sounded absurd in the room, like she had brought beginner language to an advanced conversation. Seeing where things go. After 7 months, after all the emotional intimacy, after introducing me to pieces of her life in every way except the one that actually required commitment. That answer changed something in me, because suddenly I could see how convenient the vagueness was for her. She got all the benefits of being chosen without the risk of openly choosing back. When I tried to push gently, she said labels made her anxious. She said pressure would ruin what was naturally unfolding. She said she hated forcing things. She said she was happy with me and didn't understand why I needed to define everything so sharply. That's another trick I've started noticing people use when they want to keep power. They frame your desire for clarity as rigidity. Your need for security becomes pressure. Their refusal to commit becomes emotional sophistication. Meanwhile, you're the one sleeping alone with the uncertainty they created. Around the same time, her online life got worse. What started as casual scrolling had turned into full-scale obsession. Lives, group chats, comment sections, parasocial friendships with people she did not know and would likely never meet. There was one creator in particular, some woman with a decent following, not famous enough to be truly untouchable, just famous enough to become the sun in a small digital solar system. Sienna became fixated on her. Everything circled back to that world. What she posted, what she wore, whether she'd responded to anyone, who was on the live, what the chat said, what drama was happening in that little ecosystem today. And because the algorithm had apparently decided sexuality discourse, thirst traps, and emotionally intimate performance were its highest calling, the whole thing started bleeding into how Sienna talked about herself too. She began presenting online in ways that made our offline reality feel increasingly surreal, hinting at identities she hadn't fully claimed with me, using language in public spaces that left me wondering whether I was in a relationship or just funding the background conditions for someone else's reinvention. I tried to handle it carefully. That detail matters because by the time I finally lose my patience in this story, I needed understood that I did not start there. I started with, "Hey, I miss being with you when we're actually together." Then, "Can we have some phone-free time tonight?" Then, "I feel like I'm competing with an app." Then, "This is affecting me more than I think you realize." Every version of that conversation somehow ended in the same place. She got defensive immediately, said I was trying to control how she spent her time, said I didn't want her to have friends, said these people understood parts of her healing that I didn't, said TikTok was one of the only things helping her cope lately. Helping her cope. That phrase became a shield she used against almost everything. If I said I felt ignored, I was attacking her coping. If I said I missed her, I was trying to isolate her. If I said I wanted a real date without content creation, I was dismissing something important to her. My needs, somehow, always came out of translation sounding selfish. Meanwhile, I was the one living in reality. I worked full-time, actually more than full-time, paid my bills, helped her when she was short, covered dinners, covered random costs, carried us through the kind of adult logistics that only become visible when one person isn't participating in them. She had no real savings, no consistent job, no plan that survived contact with the next mood, algorithm, or identity experiment. And still, somehow, she had the audacity to make me feel like I was the unstable one for wanting this relationship to exist in real language. That resentment built quietly, then all at once. The worst fight happened after I dragged her out on what was supposed to be a reset night. A real date. No pressure. No heavy talk. Just us. Within 20 minutes, she was filming again, then checking comments, then talking about how a live was happening later and she didn't want to miss it, then asking me to take a better photo because the first few didn't fit the vibe. I snapped. Not explosively, coldly. I said, "Do you even want to be here with me? Or am I just the guy who takes you places while you live somewhere else?" She stared at me like I had insulted her religion. Then came the speech. The one I know too well now. I was being unfair. I didn't support her. I only valued things I understood. I was jealous of her having community. I was making her choose between healing and pleasing me. That last one almost impressed me. Because if you can make a man asking for your actual presence sound like he's anti-recovery, you can justify almost anything. I said, "No, I'm asking you to choose between a screen and the person sitting right in front of you." Wrong line. Or maybe the truest line. Because she got up from the table, furious, and said I was exactly why she was scared to define this. That I would become too much the second things felt official. That I wanted ownership, not closeness. That maybe keeping things undefined had been the only reason we worked this long. And there it was. The whole rotten center of it. She had been enjoying the relationship specifically because she could keep denying it was one. I wish I could tell you I handled that with perfect dignity. I didn't. I laughed. A sharp, ugly laugh. Then I said, "You already gave me the responsibilities of a boyfriend. You just never wanted to risk being a girlfriend." That one landed. She went quiet, then started crying, then said I was cruel. And for one dangerous second, I almost folded. Because when someone cries in the middle of a fight, my first instinct is still to comfort first and evaluate later. But I didn't. Because I was too tired, too rejected, too done. And for the first time in months, maybe the first time in the whole situationship, I let her sit in the consequences of what she'd said without rushing to rescue her from my reaction. Update 1. We didn't technically end it that night. We limped for another 2 weeks. She said she wanted to try harder, said she'd been overwhelmed, said she didn't realize how disconnected I felt, said labels still scared her, but that didn't mean I wasn't important. That sentence made me sadder than angry, because at a certain point, "you're important to me" starts sounding like the emotional equivalent of a store credit refund. Not nothing, just nowhere near what was owed. Update 2. We're done. The final conversation was calm, which somehow made it worse. She said she cared about me deeply, but still wasn't sure she could be the kind of partner I wanted. I said that wasn't really the issue anymore. The issue was that she had already been taking the place of that partner in my life while refusing to stand in it honestly. She cried. I did not. Not then. I just felt hollow. Because sometimes the worst heartbreak is not losing someone who loved you badly. It's realizing they loved what you provided more than they loved being responsible for what they meant to you. Update 3. I've thought a lot about what I actually learned here. And I think it's this. Exclusivity without commitment is still a commitment. It's just one where only one person admits what it costs. That was us. I was paying real emotional rent in a place she still insisted was just temporary. I was rearranging my life around someone who kept telling me to relax and enjoy the uncertainty, while she took everything stable I offered and called it seeing where things go. And I'm embarrassed by how long I let that make sense. But I'm also relieved. Relieved that I no longer have to compete with an algorithm, a fantasy version of herself, and an exit door she never stopped protecting. Relieved that clarity is no longer being treated like some toxic trait I brought into the room. Relieved that the next time someone wants boyfriend access with stranger-level accountability, I'll know what I'm looking at. I miss her sometimes. Or maybe I miss the version of her that would have had to exist for all of this to feel fair. Either way, I sleep better now. And that probably tells me everything I need to know.